to comment, reply on that thread.
Okay. Anyways, let's start. So first of all, some update. So the CNCF Safe Working Group application, which is the most relevant CNCF level group to our working group, is still in the voting stage. And at the moment, we have 5 TOC member gave the +1, which means we are 1 short of a quorum. So ideally, maybe before next week, this thing will be like finally validated. And the working group information update, Doc had a patch up. I had a patch long time ago and finally merged. I think the current the community markdown file should be able to show the latest workgroup meeting information. Okay, let's go to the discussion, continued discussion on the, there's a, oh, yeah. About the external system in control. I think in large, I agree with Doc. Anyway, like no matter what the architecture in large choice we make, we will need a persistent queue or a cache sort of thing to like cache the actions first for delete and update, just in case people get like want to rewind their operations all the time. So
that definitely expands the technical scope.
Yeah, so the question is like how where should we put this? Say we will design this cache or persistent queue to preserve the state of the execution. Like where should we have this module?
Well, so the way I've kind of viewed this is, let's see how I describe this. So I kind of view it as a very fundamental change to the way Kubernetes works today. Unfortunately, it's a big change, right?
Okay,
the way I kind of view it is a request comes in and something in the processing flow says, wait, I need to pause you for a minute so I can do something else. I'm going to stick your request into a queue, and then I'm going to
do the check.
Yeah, not even do the check yet. I'm going to put your request into a queue, and then I'm going to return back to the client a 202.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Then yes, something, whether it's,
oh my God, are we implementing event queue, the event loop?
Well, no. So I wasn't planning on necessarily saying, okay, something else needs to monitor for when something gets added to the queue and then pick it up. Although you can do it that way. I was actually thinking more like there's 2 threads that get, or not 2 threads, but a new thread gets spun off because the main thread has to return a 202, right? Or maybe the main thread does return a 202, but then keeps on going or something like that, right? But either way, it sticks the request into some persistent store. So if the system gets recycled, they will pick up where it left off. But then the main thread or secondary thread, I don't care, picks up that job and then runs with it. So as he was saying, yes, you call out to the external system to do its job, to do its check, and eventually that thing's going to come back and say, okay, here's the result, and then something needs to then continue the normal Kubernetes message flow operation, right? Continue the path going through the admission controllers or webhooks or whatever they are, ultimately touching etcd to do the store.
How does that, what are the significant differences from this in like initializers?
Well, right. So initializers, for one thing, only get kicked off, I believe, when you're doing a create of a resource.
Right. I should, yeah. Assuming we add something similar to other parts of the life cycle.
Okay. Well, so initializers, so initializers are different to me in the sense that all initializer really does is it still lets the operation go through. But what it does is it sets some additional properties on the resource that says, okay, fine, I created the resource for you, but before you actually start doing anything real with it, let me process these initializers, right? So it's putting the pause at the wrong spot, right? It's putting the pause after the resource has been updated in etcd, but before any real processing has happened. And what we need is a pause before it even hits etcd, because we don't want other things to possibly take actions based upon this premature state getting stored in etcd. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so for initialization, you don't really have this problem because nothing else should have access or be able to even do, there's nothing to like act on to begin with.
Right.
So it becomes the case when you have current version, a requested, change on that, which is awaiting another system to confirm and switch to that one.
Yep.
So how?
Not to mention how if you can have more than one of these or what.
Yeah. So how are we gonna deal with the performance hit? Since this one is so the check is so early, basically we're gonna halt a normal process.
Well, I would assume that we would only do this if one of these third-party checks was actually turned on for this particular type of resource for this particular type of action. If we did not define a third-party check at all, then I don't think we should do anything different than what we do today.
Okay, if it's conditional, so how, like, what's the...
Okay, wait, I have it, wait. We're going to create a CRD that's just named T. So we have a CRD T.
Okay. Wait, say that again. We've created a what?
A CRD that's titled T, like the letter, and then you get a CRD T.
That's a joke, like...
Yes.
Who nerd?
Sorry.
Is it operational CRD or...
I feel like there's an inside joke going on here that I'm missing. That's okay.
CRDTs are conflict-free replicated data types.
Yeah.
Are often used for like trying asynchronous updates on data structures. So actually quite relevant.
Okay.
Yeah. So CRDT is what it's called, and it contains CRD, the custom resource definition within it.
Yeah, it's a good joke, but...
Well, what does the T stand for?
Type.
Type.
Yeah, it's a data type, basically. It's...
Huh.
Well, anyways, it's... Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so like back to the topic, if such implementation is so conditional, so how do we like persuade the community in large this is a like architecture change?
Well, I think
right?
So if this is the path we want to head down, then obviously the first step in my mind is to actually write this up in a very detailed way so people understand the exact changes that we're proposing, and then go through the normal review process, I would assume.
No, I mean, but I think we've already had a very detailed description, but I guess the question that will be hitting us is that this is like a particular problem, right? Then why do we are seeking for a general answer, a modification on the general Kubernetes architecture?
Well, I'm not sure how to solve this without solving it in a generic way.
Is it possible to do like more decoupled? Since we are mainly want to solve the delete update operation that involves external systems like service broker.
Well, yes,
right?
but I think the same check could apply for any operation, though, right? Not just create. I mean, not just delete and update. It could also be create. Right? Any operation could want to check with a third-party system.
Yeah. Or you could even think about it as it just takes a really, really long time for something to do something, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, personally, while we may talk about this as a third-party policy check, I personally wouldn't want anything in the implementation that would prevent us from doing anything during this operation. Meaning, it may not be just used for policy, right? You may be calling out to a third-party system to do some real type of operation, and as long as you're comfortable with the side effects of something later on rejecting the request, then people are free to do that. That's why I think it's important to make this almost a brand new extensibility point inside Kubernetes, and policy just happens to be one of the use cases for it.
Yeah. What? Yeah. This is so broad of a problem, like so much in the core. Trying to think, I don't even know where the right place to put it is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it's just this coming up with other places too, yeah.
See, in my mind, we could actually implement this using a fair number of things that exist in the system today, right? We may be able to implement part of it as an admission controller, where the admission controller puts something into a queue and then spins off another thread to continue doing some of the processing or whatever. To me, the real tricky part is convincing people to allow something like an admission controller to return some sort of status code back to the system to say, yeah, I passed. I mean, I didn't generate an error message, so you don't want to return an error back to the user, but I also don't want you to keep going. I want you to return a 202 immediately, right? And it's that sort of halting of the normal flow that I think is going to be the biggest challenge to convince people that it's okay to let an admission controller say, return immediately, don't keep going. I got it for you, don't worry about it.
Yeah, so for the delete case, one way you could sort of do it is if you create a custom resource that's like a delete request object, and you make users create that instead of deleting whatever else, the real object, and then you can have a custom controller that controls that.
You could, and I think that's probably similar to what Clayton was suggesting with that foo and foo request thing.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of so the thing that's very annoying there is it requires users to change their behavior.
Exactly. That's not just a little annoying, that's a big annoying. Yes.
Yeah.
And what's worse is what I mentioned in my response back to Clayton is that's almost like a resource model change at that point, right? Because you almost have to know in advance whether you're going to want some of these asynchronous checks to be performed on your resource or not, so you know whether to create this foo resource object at all. And that's annoying because you may not think you need it today, but tomorrow you may need to add a third-party policy check on your resource, and then you're changing your mind.
All of your tools will break, etc.
Exactly. Yes. That's why I think if we're allowed to solve this the right way, this almost has to be transparent to the user.
Yeah. Well, that would be nice.
And I think we can, because I think it is technically possible. The question is whether there's an appetite in Kubernetes to do it.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering if we are going to face the same problem with something like create.
Mm-hmm.
Create though just happens to have because it's the state before create is 0. You can use things like admission controllers. Although I guess if you think about namespace, there's some weird around permissions, but. All right, never mind. I'm just rambling.
Yeah. I think the use case here mostly dealing with the regretting scenario. do not make certain operations irreversible mostly. But things like create is, I think, okay, but
hence the CRDTs. If you kind of store the operation, then you have commutative data transformations. What another kind of not great way, like if you had like proxy objects or servers.
Yeah, we talked about that as well, and you run into a very similar problem where, again, the user has to understand the difference in the model, right? Because there are two resources.
Or they don't understand, and it's just like what happened.
Well, but the problem is, right, if you delete the proxy and then you want to roll back the thing, you say, okay, well, that's no big deal. I can delete proxies left and right and just create new ones. And since it has the same name as the previous one, they'll still find it as long as you're finding things by name. It's like,
no, I don't mean proxy object. I mean, I was thinking more like proxy API endpoints. So delete pod gets redirected to something else.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking that. That's interesting.
Which is that's like an easier architectural change, I think, in the way, like with already aggregated APIs and things.
Yeah.
People would be more comfortable with it. I don't know that that's the best user experience because it's almost feels not very transparent to the user.
Well, would the user know?
I guess it depends on what you do once with your custom server. It's just very unpredictable. There's so much you could do there that it feels like the behavior might be too unpredictable for my taste.
That's interesting. It is an interesting concept, though. I got to think about it. But I guess the one thing that pops out of my mind is it seems like if we did introduce this notion of something that allowed you to pause the current flow, I imagine people are going to want to have the choice of when that pause happens, meaning is it before or after certain admission controllers or webhooks? And with a proxy thing, you're basically saying, no, the pause is going to be the first thing that happens.
I mean, I guess you could still have it be after the other parts too. I think you still have the same question of where in that emission control phase, especially for like mutating ones.
Yeah.
Which I dislike mutating emission controllers a lot. Yeah. I'm okay if they didn't delete information, but when they added.
And for the proxy, we need to like return all the like the Kubernetes messages, right? The okay or error, so that user don't know that he's not talking to Kubernetes at front.
Right. You'd probably get a like, I don't know, I guess something. I don't know.
Something.
Yeah. We used to do a similar thing for OpenStack, and in order to like keep all the API interactions transparent, so basically you have to mimic all the API calls and like request response, make it a like transparent proxy. Yeah.
This is somewhat a problem also that Federation has run into.
Exactly. So yeah, the project I just mentioned was dealing with Federation, well, for OpenStack, but it applies, I think.
Hey, can you guys elaborate a little on the Federation has?
So Federation, you want to be able to administer multiple clusters.
Right.
And so if you do that where you kind of have a single API that then federates out to all the other cluster APIs, then you have to mirror every single endpoint. And any new change in Kubernetes, you have to keep up with and be able to keep consistent behavior. And that's where it kind of fell apart.
Interesting.
That it couldn't keep up like that. So the good thing is this doesn't have that problem of like, you have to have everything because it's just one specific thing. So that's better.
So I'm not as deep into the API server as I probably should be. So I'm hoping maybe you guys know this question or the answer to this question. When a request comes in and it goes through admission controllers, webhooks, or whatever it goes through, before it actually hits at the logic that stores the result inside etcd, is that pretty much, I don't want to say hard-coded, but is there pretty much like conceptually just this one piece of code inside API server that says, here's the steps I need to process, I'm going to do one at a time, and if something happens and I get recycled during the middle of it, well, then the operation is just basically lost and the client has to restart?
Basically, yes. It's pretty monolithic. I think they've been working to make it less so.
Okay. Well, that's actually good, because what that means is we could probably, if we got approval to do so, stick logic in there that says, oh, if you came across this special, or if this particular hook, whether it's an admission controller, webhook, or whatever, returned a special response, we could interpret that response as return a 202 immediately and stop the processing and assume that hook is going to continue the processing for us in its own time. So conceptually, there is an easy way to interject what we need in there somehow, assuming we could do it in a logical way.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that's good to know.
And it's made easier by that there's a master, so you don't have to worry about the distributed, that kind of issue.
Yeah, and that also means that if it is kind of like a monolith like he kind of described it, that we should also then be able to hopefully reuse that same piece of code and tell it to pick up where it left off. And or not necessarily pick up where it left off, but perhaps start a new monolithic process, but not necessarily start at the beginning of the flow, right? Start halfway through, because he's picking up where we left off, right? And so if it's all within this monolithic thing, which seems like we should be able to tell it to not only skip the back-end processes because someone else is going to do it, but also skip the front-end processes because we're now in the second phase of our processing. So I like the fact that it's all one big monolith.
The problems, you technically, I think it's totally possible, as evidenced by OpenShift, like having custom things within that flow.
Mm-hmm.
But you might get some resistance from people who are trying to slim it down.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's already too complicated. So I think that would be the bigger place that you might see.
Okay. Well, that at least in its current form, it's a monolith, which means I should be able to take a look at it and figure out what's going on, and then understand their plans for splitting up the monolith, and hopefully be able to work around those changes. So that's okay. I'm not worried about that. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So what's the conclusion? If we were to write down.
So I don't mind taking the first step in terms of writing up a design proposal, but I would really, really like it if somebody like Clayton, who at least has engaged the conversation a little, if he at least gave us a hint that he's not going to shoot it down immediately.
Okay. I know. I'll have a conversation with him at some point.
So Erica, do you work for Red Hat?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay, that would help him. Okay.
Yeah.
Insider.
Yeah, no, I think like right now it's been really busy, like in OpenShift land, and so I think everyone's brain's a little frazzled.
Yeah, that's fine. I as much as I would love to get this.
Plus, they're preparing for the hurricane.
Well, yeah. I'm in Raleigh too. Well, yeah, but in Raleigh, it's not going to miss.
Yeah, you're okay.
I've seen that, right? So, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So yeah, I have no problem with this taking some time. And I have no problem being persistent and pushy to help move it forward, except in the situation where if I know the powers that be are never going to agree to it, then I have no desire to beat my head against the wall. Right.
So I know of 3 places that we have added things into the API server and are having difficulty removing.
Okay.
So I have an argument to be made for why this would be advantageous to have as a solution upstream. Because then it would allow us to actually pull things out and be fully upstream.
Okay.
That might not make sense to you, but
well, no, as long as it makes sense to you, that's all that matters. No, but if you could talk to Clayton and get his sense for whether he's at least okay with exploring this possibility, as opposed to no way in hell, then I'm all in favor of starting the brainstorming of working up a design document and seeing where it goes. But I just want at least one Kubernetes god to say, okay, it's worth exploring.
So, for sure, one thing that will not ever be wasted work is outlining the problem, right? And ways that we thought about addressing it. So that, like, no matter what the solution is, you'll need that for some.
Well, I feel like I think, and I even think Clayton has been part of the discussion. I think we've talked about the problem quite a bit already, and I don't necessarily mind rewriting it up again as part of writing up the solution. But I, given what Clayton already knows, if he or one of the other Kubernetes gurus says, or I should say, no, let me rephrase that. If all of the Kubernetes gurus that we talk to about this say hell no, then I'm not interested in wasting my time writing up the problem statement yet again, just to have them all say no again.
Yeah.
Because I've tried to attack this problem so many different ways, and I don't mind keeping the effort as long as I see some glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, I'll put it on my list for. We'll see if I can squeeze out half hour or something.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
In the week.
Send out the feelers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very funny because even I think parts of like OpenShift has a project request, and I think part of its initialization still does rely on actually plugging into the API server's flow directly. So
interesting.
Perhaps that means that Clayton will say, "And I regret this because."
Yeah.
Which would be valuable information as well.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm being too abstract about this, but it just seems to be the entire notion of assuming that every single admission controller, every single webhook, every single possible check or operation you may want to perform in the processing before selling a story etcd, to assume that every single one of those can always be done synchronously and quickly enough to not have the client time out is just a very large assumption that I'm very surprised no one's been concerned about before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised, like, it feels like some parts of like this pod security policies or whatever must be actually get complicated when trying to figure out. Feels like there might be people who've hit it and have just kind of been told to not have so many complicated things.
Yeah, that's also possible too. Okay, so it seems like the next step here then is, Erica, for you to kind of poke on Clayton a little to get his thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I do have a slightly tangent question though for you, Erica.
Ooh, yes.
So, and I apologize, but during the SAFE call that we had, I guess last Friday.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're at your home.
Yes.
You have an incredible amount of white behind you.
Yes.
I'm assuming you probably don't have a pet.
No.
It just dawned on me. I'm sitting here looking at that and great. Okay, I don't ever show my pictures, so you can't tell this, but I believe I'm older than you. I have kids. I have a pet, and the thought of having that many pieces of white furniture is just like a non-starter. And so it kind of got me wondering. You either are very, very particular, finicky, whatever you want to call it, or you're just naturally incredibly not messy, and you don't have, the thought of you spilling something just is not going to happen. So I got
it goes back and forth between the two. But yes, I think about that. I was like, oh yeah, I don't. If I had a kid, I'd have to get rid of my pretty glass coffee table.
Oh, there's that whole aspect too. I didn't even think about that. I was just focused on how much white furniture you had.
Yeah, you need to get rid of the kid first.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just had to ask about that. I was just curious. It amused me.
Yeah.
I have a dog and kids, and like I said, there's no way that would last.
Also, another thing is IKEA furniture is not designed to last anyway, so no harm in that being white.
Oh, it's IKEA. I didn't realize that.
Some of it depends on different parts.
Okay. Okay. I apologize for getting a little personal.
Yeah.
I get distracted very easily by what's in people's background when they have the camera on. I was on a phone call once with what's his name, Aaron, the testing guy, Aaron Cricken.
Oh yeah.
And in the way background, I could see his kitchen, and he had a microwave where the clock on the microwave was flashing 12, and I could not stop staring at that darn thing, right? And so in the chat I make some comment about is the microwave really flashing 12, and he was speaking, and he finally noticed. He said, "Yeah, it is flashing 12." And I said, "Okay, I've lost all respect for you now. We're technical in nature. That should not be happening." Anyway.
Yeah, I really love it when people have like dogs or something. Oh, those are my favorite. Just like sometimes sitting on their lap, there's a little puppy.
Yeah, it's really cute, except when they won't stop barking. Then
I've not had that case.
Yeah, there's one guy at IBM who, for the longest time, actually, I'm sorry, he still does have these little dogs, and because they're small, they have very high-pitched little barks and stuff.
Chihuahuas.
It's like Chihuahuas, yeah. And inevitably, when he's on a call, somebody rings the doorbell or something happens in the house, and the dogs just go berserk. And always right when he's talking, and it's a constant. So it does get kind of annoying.
Yeah, that's the policy check you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't do it.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, the time almost runs out. So see you guys next week. Hopefully we can get some feedback from Clayton.
Yep.
All right. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Have a good week.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.